Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the Limitless tournament. Here we are, the first major that Limitless are running, thanks to the help of the Potown store. We're going to be in the first round of day 2. Players with 6-2-1 and better records have made it here so far. 5 more rounds today, and yeah, we'll see who can make top 8. Looks like our first matchup is going to be a rainbow-based Mewtwo up against an Eternatus here.
Yeah, really exciting to see this matchup. Obviously, I'm coming across from video game commentary, so Joe's going to be our expert here for this day 2 event, but hopefully I'll be able to help carry us through these games as well and sort of analyze what's going on with our players. And it looks like SirAfroPanda's side there, getting the Eternatus out, looks to be really strong. It's obviously one of the cards you want there, going to be trying to get it into VMAX stage as soon as possible and get that second energy attached on his next turn.
Yeah, pretty good start for him so far. Eternatus doesn't need too much going first. Getting an early game attachment, always a big deal. He's also been able to develop an Absol, just so we can Crobat for a few more cards here, but already the turn is looking pretty solid. Eternatus going into the Mewtwo matchup, I think the fact that you can hit 270 plus is going to put a lot of pressure on Nathan from the off here, who doesn't have much of a workable hand, to be honest. He has the Galarian Surf fetched, which is a big card in the matchup, but he may be forced to Air Balloon into it just to be a sacrifice here, because otherwise you're just sort of hedging that Mewtwo doesn't get KO'd. Wow, it's a really rough start for him.
Yeah, that was a really short turn, can only really attach and pass there, and does kind of limit the options going forward, and it allows his opponent to actually start being able to set up that Eternatus. You can see the heartbreak emoji going on there as well. Very pretty quick ball coming out into play though, so just wants to search through the deck, try and get that next Pokemon to either put down onto the bench or possibly start really putting that Eternatus into a good position.
And we know his hand is going to be good because he got rid of a Professor's Research. So he's looking to just go wide. We know he's, at the very least, got a lot of draw in his hand. He needs to fill his board completely if he wants to take a knockout on this Mewtwo and Mew. And he also needs to find the Eternatus VMAX. But we already know he has a good supporter. He's going to pick up Yveltal here. Basically, every Pokemon at this point is just being put down because it's 30 more damage. He can also use the switch now to the Yveltal because there's free retreat, just in case he does miss here. Already found himself the VMAX, so he's on a really good start already.
Yeah, exactly. He gets himself really set up into a good position. That bench obviously expanding itself to 8 now. Like you said, the more damage you can get with more Pokemon down on that bench as well with Dread End's going to really put him in a good position going into these next couple of turns. I like the switch into the Yveltal. Like you said, it just allows him to kind of have that more sort of flexible nature with his Pokemon here while he maybe gets the energies in the position that he wants.
Taking a moment here, so it's not an obvious slam down the energy, slam down all the Pokemon. maybe some sequencing coming into effect as well. He does play Great Balls as well as Communication, so there is some sequencing that you have to think about here. But it looks like he has missed the dream, and it actually gives Nathan a chance to get back into the game. He has ripped a Tag Call, and he does play one Cynthia Caitlin and one Guzma Hala here, which can hopefully get him out of this rut to really get going with his deck, to be honest. He is playing not really a conventional build of Mewtwo and Mew. As you're seeing, there's a Giratina Garchomp, which isn't really known for being in the Welder build or the Mewtwo build. This is a whole new thing. It's playing Aurora Energies and 3 different types of basic energy as well. So a ton of options for Nathan. Cynthia Caitlin getting him into another Tag Call also gets him into Tapu Koko, Prism Star. So finally getting something going. Still no big push with the Dene or anything like that, which I'm sure he will still be looking for. And I'm not sure if he's going to be launching any viable attack here unless he wants to attempt something like a Horror House to buy himself another turn. That could be an option for him at this point.
Yeah, that could certainly be a play for him to go for, just stop his opponent from using any attacks on that next turn, buys him, like you said, another turn to kind of try and source out those Dedens and try and get the cards that he really wants into his position. But it seems to be putting the Mewtwo down here with an energy and going for that Tapu Koko on the bench there as well.
Looks like we're going to see the linear attack from the Mewtwo, copying the Giratina Garchomp. Just set up 40 damage onto that Eternatus VMAX. You know, it does have 340, so it's going to take a couple of attacks to deal with it. And the fact that there was a missed energy drop, one thing you can do against Eternatus is simply deal with one Eternatus, and because they can only attach 1 energy per turn, you can almost get some turns of freedom against them if you're just able to deal with their first Eternatus as quickly as possible. So this is really nice. Also developing one of those Aurora Energies, one of the biggest deals, so that you can use that Meteor Mash with the Surfetched, which is being targeted right now with the Zigzagoons. Power Plant is another big stadium here. It, of course, shuts off Mewtwo and Mew. And Nathan isn't playing Celtic Swell, which you often associate with Mewtwo variants. He's just playing 2 copies of Viridian. And the Eternatus player is actually playing 3 copies of Power Plant. So that's something to keep an eye on as we go through these turns. But right now, looks like we're finally seeing a push with Quick Ball here. Most likely going to be grabbing a Crobat, and then he's just looking for that turn attachment by the looks of things.
Yeah, 100% Power Plant, really, really critical in. Like you said, not having that Chaotic Swell is going to kind of put him on the back seat a little bit there. Power Plant obviously allowing that Mewtwo to be shut down, can't sort of access the other moves. But it looks like that bench for the Eternatus side of things is starting to really fill up. The Zigzagoon's obviously coming down, doing that little bit of extra chip damage, and there's another Eternatus on the bench as well. Like you said, you can get rid of one, but there'll often be a few more on the bench ready to take its place and go for those really big damaging attacks. Just looks like he's trying to shuffle up his hand here a little bit, making sure that he can try and get those energies in play and get himself ready to put that Eternatus up into that front position to start picking up those knockouts. It's a full bench. Treadend's going to be picking up a huge chunk of damage, 270, and that's our first KO of the match.
Finally finds that energy attachment, takes the knockout, and thanks to the Power Plant, Nathan's hand doesn't have much push potential at all. The Power Plant is stopping most of the draw, but there's a research picked up from the top, giving him a lifeline here. We're going to see the Cherish Ball for the Jolteon GX. It does have that Swift Run GX attack that does 110 and prevents all damage coming into you next turn. So it could be a play that he's looking for this turn, always wanting to filter these because they are dead draws for you. And, you know, putting them in the discard makes it available for Mewtwo. Of course, if he does want to attack with Mewtwo, he does still need to replace that Stadium this turn if he's going to get anything going here.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of setting up to allow Mewtwo all that flexibility, but it is going to be really limited while Power Point still is in play. Debating about the Big Charm here, actually does decide to go for it, putting it onto that Mewtwo, just going to give it that extra little boost of HP. And Tapu Koko going to do its little dance of the Ancients here, going to be able to allocate out some energies, but just going down, I believe that's gone straight down onto the Surfetch there.
Yeah, this is huge.
Yeah,
this is huge. It's time to move all those energies straight over to Surfetch. There's no more energies in play, so you can just Meteor Mash through the only threat on the board, and this Galarian Surfetch is going to start to sweep here. The Marnie ended up really helping out Nathan because he's got a ton of options, and he's finally able to start filtering through all of those Pokemon in his deck. He's also got a Reset Stamp to boot. This is going to be a really huge turn for him. Meteor Mashing for 3 prizes, all the threats, all the energy off the board. And yeah, you know that he's got himself another free turn straight away as at the same time, he's equaling up this prize trade. Really awesome turn.
Yeah, exactly. That was such a comeback there, getting everything he needed to be able to put that Surfetch right into front of play and pick up that really critical KO. Of course, needs to make sure that he can focus again going into that next turn so that the Meteor Mash can obviously go off again potentially on the next turn or try and pick up that KO because Eternatus coming back into play eventually if his opponent's able to get that set up can again still pick up a really strong KO, but he has bought himself a really big opening here, and if he can capitalize on it, he's going to be able to keep getting those KOs. But first of all, Reset Stamp going to come out. That's something he doesn't necessarily want to see, taking that whole hand back into his deck and only going to be left with 3 cards, but hopefully they'll be good for him.
Does get into a research, which is helpful. From the Eternatus side, they're going to obviously want to find one more manual attachment of this turn. They're actually comming in a Crobat. Possibly it's going to be the Communication Dance, where you're just minusing 1 from hand to re-get that Crobat. That's exactly what we're seeing here. So he can get himself a fresh 5 cards, and he's going to look to at least get an energy drop. He's hit the Reset Stamp, which is a good bit of news for him. He essentially just had to take the turn off and accept that he's not doing much here. But if he can still build an Eternatus VMAX, there's still only one Surfetch that he has to go through to get right back in the driver's seat.
Exactly, and there's the VMAX going into his hand there, so that's something he can certainly look to play down exactly what he's done there, and the bench once again jumps from 5 to 8, and this just does allow that Eternatus deck to start being able to set up and get the power coming from that Dread End. Professor Research is going to be played out as well, just going to discard out those cards and regain up here to try and maybe put some more down the bench, possibly another Zigzagoon, try and get some more damage off here, and just allow that Dread End to be at its full potential. Attaches 1 energy there, down with another Veltal, so of course that's going to add, but just going to pass on this one.
Yeah, it's not too bad. You've done as much as you can do, really. You've disrupted your opponent's hand, and you've, at the same time, established an energy, and your attacker's ready to go for next turn. There's still that Power Plant in play, so really limits the drawing options that Nathan would have. We do know he's got that research, but being forced to research means at least you're not getting your Eternatus bossed up or anything like that. And because of the Absols in play as well, we're going to have to try and find Switch rather than Air Balloon. They're not viable outs anymore. Because they're kind of counterbalancing each other right now. So It's going to be interesting to see if he wants to start trying to load up this Mewtwo, despite the power plant being in play, and he basically has no options to attack with the Mewtwo at all just yet, outside of maybe the GX attack. But you basically just have to take the turn off here, leave the Surfetch active, unfortunately, and let it get knocked out, most likely just by one turn attachment here. So it looks like the turn just is straight back, thanks to that big reset stamp turn. And they're basically just threatening game at this point. They're one Pokemon away from... Actually, no, the big charm means that Mewtwo can tank a hit, but they're threatening a boss for win, essentially, next turn.
Yeah, the Crobat looking pretty vulnerable at the moment. That power plant really coming in so critical to kind of shut down the Mewtwo. And it doesn't look like he's been able to draw any of those sort of Viridian Forests I think he's running in his deck to be able to try and just remove that from play. So it's just been able to shut down this Mewtwo, and it's sitting out front at the moment. But I don't believe it's got any energies attached to it at the moment. It's got the one there, but it's just not got kind of the flexibility it needs to be able to pick up any sort of big KOs at this stage.
You would have loved to have seen a stadium here, because you could have copied a ton of attacks, potentially just panic poltergeisting and try to high roll that 340 or something like that to win all in one turn out of nowhere. But it looks like at the moment the power plant has stuck, and that's going to be all for game one. We are playing a best of 3 series, so you can see conceding this first game and telling his opponent that he'd like to go first in that second game. Seems pretty good. 55 minutes on the clock when you are playing PTCGO does give you a good amount of time to complete all the 3 games. So, yeah, in terms of the deck lists, you can see how both players are going to try and interact with things. There's the Surfetch, which can bring like big burst damage options. Both players playing those reset stamps. The Stadium Wall is going to be a really big one going into these next 2 games.
Yeah, and it's really about trying to shut that Eternatus down before it's able to kind of get going. And again, the power plant coming in so critical there at the end. He had 2 Dedens in hand, but you know, there's no point in using them if the ability is not going to activate in that stage. So it really did kind of lock down the flexibility and maneuverability that he needed to be able to get the cards into his hand to position himself correctly. But game 2, it's always a fresh start here, and you know, it's going to be interesting to see how these players are going to be able to kind of adapt to it this time, maybe trying to go on a more sort of offensive stance here. But definitely if you're that Eternatus deck, you just want to be able to get that set up and pick up some really solid KOs. But I think if you're KaiserSkorch, you're going to really hope that PowerPoint doesn't come into play as early as it did.
Yeah, I think there's an argument almost to like ignoring your Mewtwo and Mew and just like trying to attack with the Tina Chomp or trying to attack with the Reshizard even though you don't play basic energies. You just try and put a big charm on one of those and get some value out of them so that you don't have that same headache that you had in that first game. There's a big argument towards that. So we'll see how Nathan wants to react after seeing how things played out in that first game. As it stands, he's going first. He does pick up a Cherish Ball, which he can instantly play here. Whether or not he wants to thin a card or just go ahead and search out something like the Tina Chomp to attach to turn 1, or even that Mewtwo Mew if he still feels it's worthwhile. He's prized one of his Viridian Forests, so I'm almost immediately saying you should ignore Mewtwo altogether at this point. I think you should just be looking to attach to other things and just expect that you won't be able to attack with Mewtwo on certain turns. So I'd like to get some other attackers rolling here. I kind of like getting the Tina Chomp out early and just getting an energy down on it to an extent. Thinning this Jolteon means he might just be tossing the entire hand away. Psychic Energy, not too helpful right now, especially when you're not attacking with Mewtwo Mew. So you're just going to dump it all. Throwing away a reset stamp isn't great. He does find a Raw Energy. That's probably the most important energy for him because it's obviously the thing that Surfetched will use. If Surfetched is even in the deck, actually. No, so the Surfetch is also prized. Oh, no. The prizes are horrific. This is really rough for him.
Yeah, it's certainly not the prize Pokemon that you want, but I think you're right here, Joe. It's about kind of abandoning the abilities at this stage and thinking about playing around them. And I like that sort of turn 1 going for the Dedenne. Well, again, you know, it can still use its ability just to kind of shake up your hand a little bit more and try and get yourself into a good position. Mewtwo does go down, and of course the energy is attached there. So I guess while the power plant isn't in play, Nathan's maybe trying to capitalize on that and going to be trying to use the Mewtwo as best you can before power plant is there. But you need to make sure you have your other Pokemon set up as well, so that when it's activated, you have a plan B to fall back on. Eternatus is here. You can see it's just getting itself into that position there. Eternatus is going down on the bench. Some other dark type Pokemon as well, and the VMAX is going to be looking to come into play as soon as possible. Crobat, of course, coming in to reboost up the hand there to 6 cards, just allowing that extra little bit of maneuverability. And the Quick Ball again going to be pulling another Pokemon out into the hand.
Yeah, the story doesn't really change much for Eternatus. It just has some of the most incredible stats inherently. So just essentially your game plan is get it into play and start swinging with it. So all we're really looking to see here is energy drops each turn. And if he can find the power plant, that's sort of cream on top right now. Looks like he's just going to thin a card that he doesn't want to draw with that quick ball. So he picked out the Eternatus, so he doesn't draw back into it. It's going straight to the bottom of the deck. And then he's going to fire off a Marnie here. Still missing on energy attachment. He plays 10 basic energy cards, all darks, all basic energies. And will we see an attachment? No energy drop from him. A huge miss again. Really, really rough stuff.
Yeah, you can see the heartbreak literally coming out here. But I think the Marnie was actually kind of beneficial here for Nathan in the sense it gives him a few more Pokemon to play around with, but critically as well, he's also got that research. So if worse comes to worse, he can discard his hand up and get a fresh start to try and figure out what to do with those energies. And again, going for that research. So drops the 1 energy into the discard pile and actually manages to pull out a Den for even more maneuverability, gets that tag call as well to bring a tag team out to the front. It's going to be the Guzma and Hala and that Gengar Mimikyu. And, you know, Gengar Mimikyu is a card that I've played against, not necessarily my favorite card in the world because it shuts me down and then I want to cry. But it'd be interesting, I think, for this particular matchup. I think you mentioned it in game 1, Joe, just being able to kind of buy an extra turn and stopping Eternatus from doing what it does and picking up a critical KO could be critical here for Nathan.
Yeah, I think this is just deck thinning. I think he'll pretty much accept the Dede change here at the end of his turn. So just playing as many ball search cards as possible, probably even just quick balling out the Zigzagoon that he may not need coming in as well here, just to completely thin everything out of the deck that he doesn't want. And then you just toss it all away, try and find a switch card so you can start having some tempo attacks with the Mewtwo Mew. When you see no energy drop from the Eternatus, you know that you're not getting knocked out straight away in response. So you can just kind of take the freebie here. Does draw into the switch, which is really nice. Also draws into lightning energy. He only plays 3 copies of lightning. So possibly saving that for next turn seems very reasonable. Is there resistance on the Absol? I can't remember on Absol if there's resistance. Well, he's just being careful with his attack choice. Yeah, so there is psychic resist on the Absol, so he couldn't just use the Jolteon, but he's got plenty of options in there. I think there's the Vileplume that he chose to use. So tons of ways he can take an easy free prize essentially because of that missed energy attachment.
I mean, that's what you want to see from Mewtwo and Mew-GX, all those different options that Nathan had to choose between. He could work around resistances. And like you said, actually thinning out the deck and popping all this Pokemon into the discard just makes things really happy for Mewtwo. It gives itself all of those options. And, you know, switching into the switch was really good there. Having the air balloon as well to switch things around just puts him into a better position. There is going to be another Marnie played though, so all of these cards are going to jump right to the bottom of the deck. So it's going to be interesting to see if he is going to be left with a hand as good as the previous one in terms of maneuverability. Does manage to pull out an energy and the tag call as well. Eternatus, however, just going to be doing what it does best. You've got that VMAX on the bench, so again, it's gone up to 8. And, you know, if you're the opponent at this stage, you're going to be wanting to really try and get Eternatus into his position to start picking up those KOs, start taking your prize cards and get the ball rolling in your advantage.
Yeah, and Nathan took his 1 prize, but wasn't able to pick out the Galarian Surf Fetch. So he's still kind of petrified of power plants at any point. Looks like we haven't seen any found just yet already. We do find the Big Charm at least, which means the Mewtwo can now currently at least tank a hit from Eternatus. And there's only 2 Zigzagoon in the list. So we know that Mewtwo will be surviving next turn, even if it is hit with Eternatus VMAX. So this is really helping him out. He's also been able to find an energy attachment as well. So he can continue here to take another easy prize. He can just throw away the Cherish Ball, probably not too helpful for him anymore. You want to keep the tag call around because you have Guz Hala available to get yourself straight out of the power plant. So you can just go ahead and Massive Bloom again for an easy prize. And again, just keep digging into those prize cards to see if you can get that Surf Fetched. I think that's the biggest thing. Debating some other attacks here. I still feel like just using the Vileplume is reasonable. When there's only 2 Zigzagoons in the deck, you know that you're going to be tanking a hit. But we actually see the Horror House here to buy a free turn and get a few cards. I think the idea now is that he can boss his orders and try and put preliminary damage onto the Eternatus.
Well, that was the thing I really liked, having that one play where he shuffled to get the 2 bosses orders into his hand. It does just allow him to pick up those KOs, particularly while Mewtwo is sitting on the field without a power plant in play. You want to be able to try and capitalize on that advantage and pick up those solid KOs. Does a big chunk of damage to the Eternatus there, but not going to be enough to pick up the KO.
Yeah, trying to hit them for 150. Obviously, you force your opponent to draw up to 7 cards. You hope there's more trainers in there so you can do more damage. Turns out there was only 3 in there, just a ton of energy and Pokemon so far. And the power plant's finally going to come down. And we're also going to see the Yveltal come in for a derail attack. It's going to set up the damage on the Mewtwo and Mew because it obviously has that Big Charm. So trying to offset that right now with a 30 damage poke and also removing one of these Aurora energies is a really heads up and smart play here. from AfroPanda.
Yeah, it's just thinking ahead those extra couple of turns, like you said, sort of getting into a position to chip away at the advantage that Big Charm gave the Mewtwo, just remove that from being a thing you have to worry about so you can pick up a KO later on. And sort of, again, the allocation of energy there, just trying to kind of think about the end game situation that you want. And that Eternatus deck's looking pretty happy where it's got full 8 Pokemon down at the moment. Dreadent is going to be dealing a huge chunk of damage. And the Marnie here, again, just going to disrupt the hand of Nathan here, going to pop them all. Again, really good cards in terms of switch maneuverability. That boss's orders as well, going to go right down to the bottom. Putting Crobat and Den when you can't put them on your bench is unfortunate, but at least you do have the research there to bring yourself a fresh hand in the next turn.
And ripping the one-off stadium out of the top is really helpful here. I think this is also going to be his first lightning energy hitting the discard pile. He could get both lightning energy out and just research them away, try and get full value from the Tapu Koko, but these are the only energies remaining in his deck, and I don't know if he has many valid attacks after this. He has, I think, 2 switch remaining as well in the deck. He has to play very carefully with his resources here. I think this is one of the reasons why this Mewtwo variant is slightly less popular than both the Welder and the Mewtwo builds, because Welder obviously comes with its own acceleration, and the Pika-Rom sort of bolt-on package gives you extra energy burst. But this list is only really relying on one Tapu Koko Prism Star for energy acceleration and trying to use some of the more efficient attacks to get yourself through. So he's going to have to play quite carefully here, so much so that he's actually holding the research. And just thinking of using Head Bolt here with the Jolteon GX to take one more prize card. Looking to try and find that Sirfetch still. Just gets a boss. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you were, able to capitalize on that, take your prize and get that Sirfetch, it puts him in such a great position going forward, but just unfortunately not to be. He does still, of course, have the prize card advantage here. He's got 4, opponent's got 6, but that could also affect him if something like a research stamp is to come into play later on. So you just got to bear that in mind, that it's not going to come in and sort of cause a bit of trouble going into that next turn. Eternatus is going to be putting the energy down there, and going to be obviously trying to be getting that attack up again, researching with the hand, getting those extra cards in play. And there's the Eternatus coming up to the front, going to go for that Dreadent and pick up the KO. Of course, the extra bit of chip on there going to be really unfortunate for the Mewtwo. It's going to be interesting to see how Nathan's now going to be able to pilot this with the power plant in play again, whether the Mewtwo is going to be able to do anything in the rest of this game too.
Yeah, I mean, he's committing the Big Charm to the Mewtwo, but he actually has no more stadiums available to him. He's already used his GX attack, so that Mewtwo is pretty much just wasted at this point. His other stadium's prized, his Sirfetch'd is prized. Don't really know what else he can attack with. I think he only has 1 lightning energy left, so he can only really attack with Dedenne. So I think the game is pretty much wrapped up here, because all you can announce is Static Shock, and that's not going to be getting the job done.
Yeah, when you realize your out is Den attacking, that's always just a little bit concerning. I mean, crazier things have happened, but it's certainly not going to be your optimal attacker at any point in the game. But, really interesting to see sort of the devastating attacks of that Eternatus deck, just when you get it set up and it's able to just steamroll, particularly with the help of that power plant shutting down his opponent. It was really kind of like your hands were tied behind your back if you were Nathan.
Yeah, power plants really become more and more popular with Eternatus. I think throughout the Vivid Voltage meta, Eternatus has basically kept the Pokemon core the same. Sometimes you play around with the energies, but it's a stadium that's the most contentious thing. Sometimes you're playing a poison package with Dark City for some movement. Sometimes you're just playing Swell. Sometimes you play like Black Market Prism Star. But power plant has seemed to be becoming the overwhelming favorite for denying, Mewtwo obviously is a big one. But just in general, people pushing with Dedenne and stuff like that so that they miss their optimal turns, just because Eternatus's optimal game plan is so simple and just so effective at beating down people that the power plant just makes a lot of sense, especially with the high Marnie and the reset stamp count. You're just providing like huge pressure whilst also giving your opponent not much to work with. It's a really, really solid combo right now.
Yeah, and Eternatus is able to kind of work around having the power plant in play and everything. It all just works really well for that deck. And again, we saw it not only affect the Mewtwo, but also the Dedens at the end of that game 1. And like you said, particularly when players are relying on those abilities of Pokemon like Dedenne, like Crobat, like Eldegoss, it just completely shuts them down from doing what you need them to do and kind of makes them just a little bit of a dead card at that point. Unless, of course, you are relying on that Dedenne to pick up a KO at the end, but it just wasn't to be. We weren't going to see it, Joe. It wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, Nathan had a rough rub of the green in that second game, prizing one of his 2 stadiums and the Sirfetch, kind of like some of the biggest things you'd want in that matchup. I would have liked to seen him adapt a little bit better. When you see those prize cards, those options aren't available to you. Trying to just sort of trundle along with the Mewtwo's just is kind of off limits. And we saw that essentially, that he, as soon as the first one was knocked out, the only other thing that had energy in play was a Mewtwo that was unusable, essentially. So if he had started committing energy attachments to the sort of less conventional Pokemon like the Giratina Garchomp, just so that you have attacks throughout the game, could have been a really big deal. Especially because we saw the Eternatus like miss some energy drops, so you could have tried to go aggressive with that approach. And then, you know, if you are able to pick out those things from the prize cards, you can weave in other attackers later. So that would have been cool to see.
Yeah, exactly. And I liked the way he kind of went for that strategy at the beginning, going for the Mewtwo while Power Plant wasn't in play. It gave him all that flexibility, which was great. But you did say earlier, Joe, that he kind of really needed to have a plan B for when Power Plant came into effect. And although it was running for him really well at that point, he got, I think it was the one Viridian Forest in, Power Plant came straight back out. I think his opponent was running 3 of them. So the odds were kind of stacked against him, particularly when the other Viridian Forest was prized. So very unfortunate, but still a really great set.